It's important to know what benefits to expect when adopting a new practice, but it may be even more important to understand the potential disadvantages. In this video, we'll explore some drawbacks experienced by these farmers and hear how they're addressing various challenges.
The perception is that it's definitely more work, and it is. You know, if you can put cattle into here for 5 days into my 12-acre paddock, or I have to move them 5 times a day, I got to buy polywire and put up fences and that. So there's more work there, and I think, you know, that's probably one of the perceptions.
It is more work, and we've had some help that I don't think are too keen on the on that labor, because you have to run out to that field and they have to remember to do it. You know, that's the other thing. If you don't remember to do it, it doesn't work very good, and you end up with cows that are greasy. So
the biggest thing, and sometimes I'm acknowledged of it and sometimes not, is the daily move. Everybody that I've talked to that's either grazing otherwise or not grazing at all goes, oh my gosh, I don't want to move animals every day. Our typical move is 15 to 20 minutes, and there are days that it can go to an hour, depending if we're moving completely to a different place or setting up a paddock, but we never go over 45 minutes to an hour. Most days it's 15 or 20 minutes.
I think there's obviously setbacks. I mean, if you stock cattle that heavily and you make them clean it all up, I mean, if cattle were in here for 12 hours, they could pick what they wanted to. Like I said before, if we leave them in here for a longer period of time and make them clean everything up, you're going to hurt some individual animal performance. Our thought is, as a whole overall, it improves the operation, and the cattle as a group will put on more total pounds.
Because it's so much harder with the dairy because of the dairy cows and all their nutritional needs, and they're you know, not quite as efficient as the beef are in the whole processing game. To have to work with a really low quality system and build it while you're milking cows.
for dairy farmers, a lot of times they're going to poo-poo it because they're concerned about trying to graze too mature grass. But I think that's, with proper management and you know, everybody talks about should you graze harder in the spring or not, and I think if you're going to do the mob grazing, I think you got to start early and you got to graze you got to knock that grass back.
For the dairy cows especially, we just want to be on that early cycle, because as it changes so fast. And obviously with cows, you know, you can register it daily in the bulk tank, and you can just see how fast that milk starts to plummet as that maturity cycle increases.
We got up to where we had about 1,200 cattle on this farm in one group, and the problem there is if you get, you know, it's like a wave effect. If you get cattle in a corner of a fence, the front cattle all stop, and then you have 600 or 700 cattle that come behind them. It's like a wave. The back cattle can hit the front cattle, and you can lose a fence. We had some cattle, you know, knock a 4-wire fence, a perimeter fence down here, and got out. And the next year we needed to increase how many cattle were on this farm total, and we just were not comfortable putting that many cattle in one group, basically because of the issue I talked about with the bigger pastures, but also because you get that many cattle in a group and you just, there's something that can go wrong.
Sure.
You know,
When I first inherited this land, it was in excellent shape. A lot of it was, my dad was a dairy farmer. He's cropped and grazed it. I had good species, had really good growth, and I wrecked it. So I took most of the farm, and part of it was the high density. High density has some really good things. You can really heal the land. You can wreck the land probably twice as fast. And we went through a bad stretch. We had 4 to 5 years of drought. I was overgrazing. I didn't destock in time, and by overgrazing those plants, I eventually killed them off until we got just a downward spiral. And finally got my numbers corrected, probably year 6 or so after the drought now. And I've got them back, and they're better than they were before, but it took a lot of time, and you can wreck fields with high density as well. But
you know, it's going to cost you some feed production, because you know you're going to feed that to the soil, and also while you're waiting to graze to get to that or to graze it, you potentially could have taken a cutting or a grazing pass and had it regrow back up again for a second. So when I waited till the middle of July to hit this field, I could have actually been on my second crop at that point. So I mean, you know, I'm kind of giving up a cutting, but at the same time, there's so much material out there, I'm not totally convinced that you lose a whole lot. Yeah, I've heard the really good. I've heard guys just pile on it. You know, I mean, I think it's unfair for the people that are really critical, because more often than not, they've probably never tried it, never tried anything even close to it. Or maybe they've only done it for a year or two, and you know, some of this may take a few years to really see. So, you know, like what Greg is saying, you know, it took 4 years before all of a sudden, you know, it's like he just, you know, it really popped.
As mob grazing gains ground and farmers continue to define the practice through adoption and adaptation, it's clear that it has both enormous potential and a few challenges to address. In the next video, we'll get the nuts and bolts on how best to implement mob grazing.